All right, we're going beyond the rabbit hole today. What we're doing is building a toolkit, a guide for thinking more clearly in what's become a very, very confusing online world. And we're going to start with a feeling I'm pretty sure you've had while scrolling.
You know that feeling, right? You're listening to someone online who claims they have all the answers. They're exposing the truth, but your body, your nervous system, just tightens up. You can't exactly explain why, but something feels deeply wrong, even if you find yourself nodding along with some of what they're saying.
Well, it turns out that feeling actually has a name. You're not just reacting to the words they're saying, the content. You're reacting to a really deep contradiction that's happening inside their message. It's called the recursive Rorschach effect.
So let's dive into that unsettling feeling. Because it turns out your gut reaction, that little alarm bell going off, it's an incredibly sophisticated piece of equipment, way smarter than we give it credit for.
And here is that contradiction, laid out plain as day. On the one hand, what they claim is that they're here to expose control, to seek truth, to question absolutely everything. But what you feel coming from them is something else entirely. It's a demand for absolute certainty, a kind of punishment for any ambiguity, and an attempt to overwrite your own individual perspective. So that feeling of unease, I want to be really clear about this. It is not fear. It's not you being weak or scared of the truth, no. It's actually a sign that your nervous system is working perfectly. It's spotting that deep contradiction, and that, my friend, is a strength. So, this means we really need to reframe the whole problem. It's not about trying to sort every bit of information into a true pile or a lie pile. It's about recognizing that maybe, just maybe, you've outgrown that black and white way of looking at the world. So, here's a much better way to think about these sources. Let's call them meaning engines. See, they aren't prophets telling you the truth, and they're not necessarily liars. They're tools. They are incredibly useful for asking certain kinds of questions, but like any powerful tool, they can be really dangerous if you use them for the wrong job. For instance, a meaning engine can be amazing for spotting when our institutions are failing us or for pushing us to question authority. That's its use. The danger zone is when we start treating it as the complete picture, the only source of truth, when it stops being a tool and becomes our entire identity. So please remember this. When you stepped back from one of these all-encompassing worldviews, you didn't do it out of fear. You did it because you outgrew the frame they were offering. And that is not cynicism. That is a new kind of literacy. Okay, so if we're not just going to accept or reject things outright, what do we actually do? Well, in this section, we are going to build an epistemic toolkit. Think of it as a set of practical, real-world rules that let you explore really challenging ideas without getting captured by them. I absolutely love this metaphor. Think about it. There can be real energy, real insight buried in some of this really challenging information. It's just like radioactive ore. You can extract its power, you can use it, but you have to handle it with extreme care. You would never, ever cuddle it. So here are 5 rules for safely extracting that energy. Rule 1. Keep the useful question, but drop the extreme all-or-nothing conclusion. 2. Treat patterns as hints, as clues, but not as final verdicts that demand your total belief. 3. Be super suspicious of urgency. Real truth doesn't have an expiration date. If it demands you act now, it's probably recruiting you. 4. If just disagreeing with someone makes you a bad person in their eyes, get out. That's just obedience training. And 5, the most powerful one, remember that you are always allowed to just say, I don't know. Now, on top of those rules, let's add a simple and, kind of ruthless personal filter. Think of it like a 4-layer checkpoint that you run every single significant claim through. No exceptions. First up, layer 1, the source. Ask yourself, does this person's authority come from evidence they present or from who they claim to be? If the answer is basically, trust me because I'm special, because I'm the chosen one who can see, then you need to seriously downgrade your confidence. Layer 2 is falsifiability, and this one is so important. Could this idea, even in theory, be proven wrong? I mean, is there anything that could happen that would make them say, oops, I guess I was mistaken? If every single piece of evidence, even contradictory evidence, is just twisted to become more proof, then what you're dealing with isn't an insight. It's a closed belief system. Okay, layer 3 is the psychological effect. Just check in with yourself. After you listen to this stuff, how do you actually feel? Do you feel calmer, clearer, maybe a little more humbled? Or do you feel sharper, angrier, more agitated? Genuine truth tends to flatten the ego, not puff it up. And the final layer of our filter, the social cost. Ask yourself this simple question: what happens if I just quietly walk away? If you can just stop believing and move on with your life, fine. But if walking away means you get shamed, you're exiled, you lose your entire community, well, then you weren't part of a truth-seeking project. You were in a tribe. So why? Why is all of this happening in the first place? Why does our information world feel like such a total minefield right now? Let's just zoom out for a second and look at the messy reality, the colliding forces that got us here. See, it's not any one single thing. It's more like a perfect storm. First, our major institutions lost a ton of credibility. Then, you have our human brains, which hate uncertainty so much that we'll grab onto any replacement certainty, even a bad one. Then the internet comes along and turns our natural ability for pattern recognition into this weaponized feedback loop. And before you know it, truth isn't a method anymore. It's an identity, a flag to wave. And right in the middle of all that chaos, you just quietly stepped out of the loop. And this leads to a really profound insight. Most of these online truth communities, they aren't actually chasing reality. What they're really doing is treating the symptoms of meaning withdrawal. They're offering a cure for a world that feels meaningless, and that cure is certainty and a role to play in some grand drama. Which brings us to our final section. Let's call it the quiet punchline. Because after you step away from all the noise and all the drama, you're left with this new way of being. And it's not cynicism, and it's not apathy. It's a kind of amused clarity, and it is incredibly powerful. This right here, this is the quiet tell, the final distinction that most people miss. A real search for truth, it invites friction. It's okay with being uncertain. It can survive doubt. But a belief system, it has to manage friction. It needs your applause, your loyalty. It needs bouncers at the door. One is strong enough to be questioned. The other is so brittle, it collapses. So what's the ultimate posture in all this? I don't know, but maybe it's something like this: viewing the whole human drama as one long comedy. Yeah, sometimes it's a dark comedy, and sometimes it's just plain dumb, but it's almost never worth losing your mind over. So, I'll leave you with this final question to think about. Once you really let go of that need to be right, the need to have the final answer, to win the big argument, what new things suddenly become possible in your life? What new space opens up for you?